For a long time, the world believed the financial system was solid. Not perfect, not fair, but solid. Banks were too big to fail. Markets were efficient. Risk was measured, priced, controlled. And if anything ever went wrong, the adults in the room would step in. That belief didn't shatter all at once. It cracked quietly and then collapsed. Because what happened in 2008 wasn't a sudden accident. It was the moment a carefully maintained illusion finally ran out of excuses. In the early 2000s, money was cheap and confidence was everywhere. Interest rates stayed low, credit flowed freely, and owning a home stopped being a milestone and started becoming a strategy. Houses weren't just places to live anymore. They were vehicles for wealth, leverage, and speculation. Banks realized something powerful. They didn't need borrowers to succeed long-term. They just needed loans to exist long enough to be sold. So they changed the game. Mortgages were no longer held by the banks that issued them. They were bundled, sliced, repackaged, and shipped across the global financial system as safe investments. These bundles were sold to pension funds, insurance companies, and governments, often stamped with top safety ratings by agencies like Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch Ratings. On paper, it looked brilliant. In reality, it was fragile. Because the quality of the loans inside those bundles didn't matter anymore. Quantity did. Loans were issued to people with no savings, unstable income, or no verification at all. Adjustable rates were framed as opportunities. Risk was dismissed as distributed. And every step of the chain got paid whether the homeowner succeeded or failed. No one wanted the music to stop. Then finance found a way to bet on the collapse itself. New instruments emerged that allowed investors to profit if those mortgage bundles failed. The system reached a surreal point where losses became lucrative as long as they happened somewhere else. Risk didn't disappear, it multiplied. By the mid-2000s, warning signs were everywhere. Home prices rose faster than wages. Entire neighborhoods were built for buyers who never arrived. Properties flipped hands without ever being lived in. But the market kept smiling. And smiles are persuasive. Until they aren't. When interest rates began to rise, reality caught up. Monthly payments jumped. Defaults increased. Foreclosures spread street by street. Suddenly, the assets everyone trusted were worth far less than promised. Confidence evaporated. In 2008, one of Wall Street's most powerful institutions, Lehman Brothers, collapsed almost overnight. Others barely survived. Bear Stearns vanished into emergency mergers. Even AIG, a global insurance giant, stood on the edge. Banks stopped trusting each other. Credit froze. Businesses couldn't borrow. Workers were laid off. Retirement accounts shrank in silence. This wasn't a Wall Street problem anymore. It was everywhere. And then came the rescue. Governments stepped in with unprecedented force. In the United States, programs like TARP poured vast sums into stabilizing financial institutions. Central banks flooded markets with liquidity. The justification was simple. If the system failed, everything failed. But the consequences were uneven. Millions lost their homes, jobs vanished, savings disappeared. Meanwhile, many of the institutions responsible emerged intact, and in some cases, stronger than before. Trust didn't break loudly, it drained away. The years that followed reshaped the world quietly. Interest rates stayed near zero. Central banks expanded their balance sheets. Asset prices climbed. Stock markets surged. Real estate rebounded. But wages lagged, costs rose, and inequality widened. If you owned assets, you recovered quickly. If you didn't, you waited and waited. Then another shock arrived. In 2020, the global economy shut down. Once again, the solution was speed and scale. Trillions were created. Credit flowed instantly. Markets were protected at all costs. For a moment, it felt like the lesson had been learned, that collapse could be prevented forever. But money has memory. By 2021, inflation returned with force. Prices rose faster than paychecks. Central banks reversed course. Rates climbed. Markets wobbled.
Debt became heavier. The same system, now larger and more interconnected, revealed familiar stress lines. Different names, same dynamics. So what did 2008 really teach us? That complexity doesn't eliminate risk, it hides it. That incentives shape behavior more than warnings ever will. And that systems designed to protect themselves rarely protect people. The financial world didn't become safer after the crisis. It became faster, more abstract, more distant from everyday life. And that distance is dangerous. Because the next crisis won't arrive with a countdown. It will arrive the way the last one did, quietly, confidently, and wrapped in reassurances. Real security doesn't come from blind trust in markets or institutions. It comes from understanding patterns. Bubbles form, leverage builds, confidence peaks, then something small breaks, and everything connected to it follows. History doesn't need to repeat to be relevant. It just needs to rhyme. And if you know the rhythm, you can hear the change in tempo before the crash. Because when the floor disappears again, and it will, those who saw it coming won't be the loudest. They'll be the ones still standing.